I was getting a haircut yesterday at the barbershop, Scottsdale Barbershop. Incredible barbershop. It's been in Scottsdale since the 50s. And you know that movie Barbershop, how everything comes through the barbershop, and then LeBron James does a special on HBO, I think. I forget what it's called, but it's him in a barbershop with a bunch of guys. And they connect. And I've never seen it happen so much as it does at this barbershop. Like, remember, I got my Valentine's Day dinner reservations because of this barbershop.
Oh, yeah.
There's an NBA player named Frank Kaminsky, plays for the Suns. He apparently lives on my street. He found some stray dogs on the street. So he called the barbershop and said, doesn't Johnjay rescue dogs? So the barbershop called me and said, Frank found these dogs. Can you take these dogs? I go, yeah, no problem. Tell him to call me. And then it turns out that Frank found the owners of the dogs, and the owners of the dogs also see the other barber. And
my gosh.
Like
all connected.
They were all
Small
connected.
world.
Right? So anyway, the guy who owns the barbershop, his name is Arson. There's a guy named Israel, a Mexican guy. He cuts barber, and then he cuts hair, and then there's a guy named Alex. He cuts my hair from Russia. So there's a Russian guy and Mexican guys. So we started talking, and Israel and I speak Spanish to each other all the time. And the Russian guy goes, oh, so you're Mexican? I said, yeah. We started talking, blah, blah. And then he go, we're Russian. And I was like, I have some Russian in me. They're Russian Jews. And I said, I think I'm Russian Jew too. And they go, what do you mean? And I start to, I go, I have a distant relative, like a great-grandfather that came from Russia. And they started asking me questions about it. And I go, wait a second. I go, let me call my uncle. Because my uncle Sergio, my tío Sergio, he's like was in charge of our family tree back in the day. So I called my uncle from the barbershop. And all of a sudden, I learned all this stuff about my family that I had no idea. So here's the short version. So my great-great-grandfather in 1863 left Poland. He was a Polish Jew, and he came to the United States. He was 16 years old, came to the United States. And immediately, the way he says it, I should almost get him on the phone. In fact, he told me, he goes, you got the story all chingadera it up. He came to New York in 1863. He was 16. They gave him a Union uniform and a rifle. He got sent to the Battle of Gettysburg. He spent the rest of the Civil War in a prisoner camp. Then he got out and he started a business at the Sangre de Cristo Pass in Colorado. So he had some big business there, right? A gunslinger tried to rob him, and he shot and killed the gunslinger. The guy's name was Sam Perry. My relative, great-great-grandfather, got put in prison for killing this guy. Mm-hmm. But the Jewish community got so upset because it was in self-defense that they started protesting. And because it was self-defense, they broke into the prison and they left the door to his cell open.
Whoa.
He took off and escaped to Magdalena, Mexico.
Whoa, that's crazy.
And this is him. Like in a Union uniform.
That's insane.
In 1860. And he looks just like my tío Javier.
And that's where they stayed, Magdalena.
They stayed in Mexico.
Wow.
And then he started a family. And it was such a crazy story.
Because that's where is your mom from Magdalena?
My mom is from Santana, which is an hour away.
Yeah. Right
and then he starts going off. Then he had his brothers come from Russia, was in the Russian Navy, and he defected, became a colonel in Mexico, and he was known as the Mexican Cossack. They both had wild stories. There's a book. There's all kinds of stuff. They named him the Butcher because he made Christmas trees and hung up his enemies on the Christmas trees.
Oh my God!
All these battles. Then he met a Swiss woman. There's all these brothers came from Russia after all that now, and they all came to Mexico. And then that's where it all. And there's articles in the paper. He sent me all these articles in the paper, the Tombstone paper, all this stuff. Anyway, such a. Then there's that whole story of the. So, anyways, the Russian, Germans, and Mexicans.
The Mexicans.
But I have a great-great-grandfather who fought in the Civil War and killed somebody.
In self-defense.
In self-defense,
and then escaped prison. So anyway, I thought that was, and I have all the pictures. So it's like
that's awesome that your tío Sergio keeps track of all of that, so he's able to tell you. Because I'm sure, we're all connected to something crazy that happened in the past, but we don't know.
I know,
we don't know
right?
about it.
I know. It was such a cool conversation to have with him last night. And then the Russians were just sitting there with their mouths open. What? Apparently, I'm from Poland. Whatever. So it was just a cool little story. And I had to tell my sister, and I told my wife, and I had to tell you guys.
What did your sister say?
She's just like, oh my God, I had no idea. I know. And then she was like, okay, bye.
Really? I would think that's like a good 10-minute. Oh my God.
Oh no, I said Cape High. I had to go to bed.
Oh, okay.
I was like,
Alright,
it's
so that
$9:15.
makes sense.
It's
That makes
9:15. I go, if you would have gone to your little party last night, we could have been talking all night. But it's 9:15. I got to go to bed.
My goodness.
You're such a
Your
treat.
little party.
Yeah, I was like, come on. So anyway, that's just little history. So it was kind of weird to have family members. I thought all my, I never really, because my dad's family, my great grandfather was an orphan. He was in an orphanage and he was missing an arm. Right? There's pictures. It's weird, and he is Indonesian, dark Asian, dark. Right? So it's kind of weird. I don't know his story.
Doesn't this make you want to like dig more? And
Does kind of. But I don't know how to trust all that stuff. If you go to Ancestry, like how am I gonna?
I don't know. Well, I mean, look more into the articles that your tío Sergio sent you.
Do you know, there's plenty of people that have found other brothers and sisters and stuff through Ancestry.com because other people have been looking and you never know where the family tree goes until you do one of those things.
That's true.
I think it'd be really interesting just knowing what you know now, like more of that from the other side would be cool.
Now, and also now that I know that great grandfather lived in Colorado, so he must have planted some seeds there, right?
Oh,
For
yeah.
sure.
What if I'm related to the Unfugs?
You might be. Did you ever visit Walsenburg?
What if they're like, and then his girlfriend started this Unfug hardware store. What?
Dun, dun, dun.
Anyway, so that's just a little something. I thought it was something that happened yesterday. I got to tell you, I'm glad. It's so funny how sometimes I hear story. I live through something. I hear it in my head. I see it in my head, and I want to bring it up on the air. And then I'm like, well, I haven't vetted it out yet or worked it out in my head. I'm going to tell it. It's like this story here. I didn't really work it out in my head yet. So I thought I'll just be a podcast. And I'm glad I didn't bring it up on the air.
Why? It's
Because it didn't
fascinating.
go anywhere. I think I needed to vet it out some more. I thought about maybe getting my uncle on the air to tell the story. But my uncle cusses and doesn't care.
He doesn't get it that you can't cuss on the radio.
No. No.
That's funny.
And he wouldn't, he wouldn't hold back.
He'd be like, "Cállate," and then he'll start cussing more.
Yeah, and there's no racial boundaries. Like he'll be like, he killed this person and he killed that person. Like he would just tell you, instead of, like if they were from China, he would use whatever slang they use in China. You know how Mexicans are.
But your story, there's something that's fascinating to me that I never even thought about. So this was in the 1800s, and you said the people protested to get him out of jail.
I know.
I wouldn't have thought protests like that were happening for anything in any community in the 1800s.
Yeah, true.
So just even knowing that happened is a fascinating thing.
I wonder if you Google Sam Perry and see what you find. Oh, apparently he performed on American Idol when Doves Cry.
Talented guy.
That's the guy my uncle killed. Only Prince does when Doves Cry. Sam Perry's the guy my uncle killed, but I don't know how to find. How would you find? Oh, he was on The Voice. My bad.
1800s.
I feel like there's probably been a few Sam Perrys.
Yeah, what do you do?
think?
Like a pretty common name.
How do you find something like
Sam Perry from the 1800s, and then there's a bunch of, there's a lot of Sam Perrys.
Colorado?
Colorado.
But do you think they'd have records or something like that from the 1800s?
Civil War?
What if we find out they had a Facebook back then? You find his 1800s Facebook page.
Gunslinger? Whoa, this guy's handsome.
Is it an old picture or is it just a guy named Sam Perry?
Sam Perry won The Voice in 2018. Time traveler.
That's where it went. He's just been traveling in time.
No, that's a story. For
Oh,
a
here it is.
podcast.
Here he is. Oh, wow. He really was a gunslinger.
What are you seeing?
It says this a list of old West gunfighters in the American frontier, old lawmen. I got to look him, but just has all their names.
If he was a gunslinger and he lost a gunfight to your great-great-grandfather or great-grandfather, then your great-grandfather was a badass.
Total badass.
If he took down a gunslinger that was trying to get the jump on him.
What if this is passed down generation to generation, and I don't know that that's supposed to be me right now, and I need to go work for the FBI?
Oh, I was going to sling some guns.
Don't you get
All of a
it?
sudden, Johnjay comes in. He's got,
No,
let's do the show.
you can't even make eggs. You can't handle firearms.
I don't know. Civil War veterans. Anyway, if you're listening to this podcast and you find any information about I just want to make it good for the Sam Perry family. Give him a call. Tell them I'm sorry. You tried to rob my
Killing it with
great grandpa. Anyway, that's our podcast. It's Johnjay and Rich.